Hey guys, it's Dan. In today's lecture, I'd like to show you how to use image underlays to create analytical diagrams. So to begin, first you open up a new Illustrator document, and I'm going to go ahead and place the image as a reference that I'm going to use. I'm going to make this a little bigger just for the visual purposes. Now that we have our underlays, we can begin to start diagramming the diagramming process. So to start off, we're going to put this layer, or the image, on its own layer. Let's call this image. Okay. Now, let's call this image. Now let's go ahead and lock this layer and create a new layer underneath our image layer, so that when we draw, let's go ahead and change the color so we can see underneath. When we draw, we should be able to see underneath our image work. Here we go. If that's not the case, go back into your Photoshop file and turn off the background so that only the lines come through. Okay. To begin, let's go ahead and draw in the structure. That way we can use our structural centers as snaps to connect lines to in the future. So let's get us a color that we can see, and since these structural columns are circles, I'm going to pull up the circle. Now if I hover over the center of what I think this circle is going to be, and I press the Alt key while creating a circle and the Shift key, it will create a circle from the origin point in the center. And holding down the Shift key allows it to stay as a circle rather than a distorted circle or an ellipse. I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing this color on the underside, so what I want to do is take the image layer, and to select the image behind, go ahead and click to the right of the little circle. It selects everything on that layer. Since we only have one thing on that layer, it's going to be the image, so I went to do that. That's an easy way to select the image. Now I want to put a blend mode on the image so that you'll be able to see through it, so only the black lines come through. So I'm going to go to the gradient tab and pull open the transparency settings and see where it says the blend mode is normal. Let's change the blend mode to multiply. Now you can see the orange behind the black lines. So let's go ahead, lock our image layer again, and go back to our color. So, simple way of copying the structure would be to hold down, grab the center of the circle and hold down the Alt key and the Shift key to lock it orthogonal in the orthogonal direction, and Alt will copy a version of it for us. So I'll bring it over to the next structural member, try and get it exactly in the center, and now I have a structural member. Now I have two columns that are placed the distance of the structural grid on the plan. So if I want to go ahead and test this, by I want to test to see if all the rest of the structural members are on the same grid. If I press Control D, it'll duplicate the last action. And now, since they're the same distance apart, I should just duplicate it a couple more times so that we have the structural members in the right place on the drawings. So we can try the same trick. This time I'm going to select all of my structural columns, and holding down on the center point with the Alt key and then the Shift key, and I'll be able to copy straight down another row of columns. So I'm going to try and get this in the dead center to make sure that we get the same distance apart, because in this case it's a square grid. I want to be able to get the same spacing between all the columns. So I'm going to select the row of columns that I'm going to copy plus one column from the other row. So when I copy it, I'm going to copy this from center to this center, and we'll have gotten columns that are spaced the same distance apart. I'm going to duplicate this one more time, and now we have roughly placed the columns. Now that our columns are in place, we can start to build up some guidelines to see where to start aligning things. So I want to bring up the rulers by going to View, Show Rulers, and I want to grab a horizontal guideline. So I got one guideline, and you can copy a guideline. If you can't move your guidelines might be locked. Right click in a blank part of the screen and check off Lock Guidelines. Now your guidelines are free, and I want to try and snap my horizontal guidelines to the center line of my structural grid. Now let's grab a vertical guideline from the left hand side and begin to snap our guidelines to the centers. Make sure your smart snaps are on so that you'll be able to snap to the centers of these guys. To do that, go to View, Smart Guides. Now we have guidelines roughly placed for the column grid, so we can continue our diagramming process. Let's call this layer Columns, and I'd like to begin the first diagram, and that would be a unit to whole diagram. Because this is a square, this plan is essentially a square created by a series of 9 squares. So what we want to do is grab a square, and because we created this column grid in a square system, I will be able to go from guideline corner to the next guideline corner and hold down the Shift key. If you hold down the Shift key, it allows you to create strictly orthogonal shapes. In this case, it will create a perfect square if you hold down the Shift key, just like if you hold down the Shift key, it'll create a perfect circle. So now that I have this square here, for visual purposes, I want to shrink it so that it sits just inside the column line. And to copy this shape over, I want to grab, hold on, let's put this shape on its new layer. So grab the square and put it on a new layer, and we will call this unit to whole. Okay. To copy the square exactly, we want to grab the square plus one column. Let's repeat the copy process. Grab another column and another square and copy it over. Okay, let's see what we got. To be able to view our results, I can turn off the image. And let's turn off our guides. To turn off the guides, go right click on the blank part of the screen and click Hide Guides.